Some people fish for fish, others fish for thoughts. Today I was thinking about something, about how before any question about life, before any attempt to understand, there is something much simpler and at the same time much deeper, the fact of existing. And to perceive this, perhaps it would be necessary to go back far, far before cities, before humanity, even before the earth, to return to a moment when there was no one to ask anything. There was no consciousness, there was no philosophy, there was no language, there was not even the idea of meaning. There existed only what existed. Imagine a universe before any observer, without eyes to see, without a mind to interpret, without someone to say that something is beautiful or strange. Stars arose and died without witnesses. Galaxies formed and collided in absolute silence. Nothing sought an explanation because there was no one to ask. Nothing needed meaning because there was no one to look for it. Still, everything happened. The universe, it did not wait for someone to understand to begin existing. It simply existed. And perhaps this is one of the simplest and most difficult ideas to accept. Existence came before the explanation. For billions of years, everything happened without any need for meaning. Matter organized itself, transformed itself, hid itself. Time, it ran even without someone to perceive it. Space, it opened up even without someone to occupy it. There was no narrative, there was no formulated purpose. There was only the silent fact that something was there. And if we could observe that distant moment, we would find a universe in constant motion, but completely indifferent to the questions that would only arise much later. Stars being born, burning, exploding, elements being formed, planets emerging slowly from cosmic dust. None of this had a conscious explanation. There was no thought accompanying each process. There was no narrating voice. There existed only the flow, a continuous flow of existence. And yet something curious happened in this long and silent process, without intention, without planning, without consciousness, let's say. The universe began to create conditions for something new, matter. It organized itself into increasingly complex forms. Atoms formed molecules. Molecules formed larger structures. And at some distant moment, on a small planet orbiting a common star, the first signs of life appeared. There was no announcement. There was no explanation. It just happened. Life appeared in the same way that the stars emerged, as a continuity of existence. For a long time, this life also asked absolutely nothing. It simply existed, grew, adapted, transformed. There was no reflection, there was no questioning, only a basic impulse to live. Existence continued coming before any explanation. The universe, it kept happening, and life followed within it, without the need to understand why. Only much later, very recently, compared to the age of the cosmos, something different emerged: consciousness. For the first time, the universe began to observe itself. For the first time, someone looked at the sky and asked, "What is this? Why does everything exist? What is the meaning of being here?" These questions, they are recent, extremely recent. For billions of years, nothing asked anything. Existence did not need answers to happen. It simply was. And perhaps this changes the way we view the very experience of being alive. Because many times we think that we need to understand everything to exist with a certain tranquility, as if the explanation came first, as if meaning needed to be defined. But the history of the universe itself shows the opposite. First came being, then came the questions. First came existence, and then came the interpretations. You are now part of this same flow. After billions of years of transformations, after stars that emerged and disappeared, after planets that formed slowly, this moment exists. You breathing, you perceiving, reading, hearing these words. It is not necessary to understand all of this for it to happen. It is not necessary to solve the meaning of life for life to be happening. Before any explanation, something much simpler exists. You are here, and perhaps consciousness has created the need for answers. Perhaps the mind began for something that by itself was already complete. The universe, it did not wait for an explanation to exist. Life did not wait for a definition to emerge. And perhaps you also do not need to wait for a definitive answer to simply be. There is something deeply silent in this, a kind of return to the basics, to the pure and simple fact of existing. And when you perceive this, something softens. The need to understand everything loses its strength, not because the questions are not important, by no means, but because they cease to be urgent. Before answering, something is already happening. Before explaining, the instant itself already exists. And before any theory, the experience already exists. The air entering, the body present, time happening, and consciousness perceiving. Perhaps deep down, the universe has taken billions of years to reach this point, a moment in which it observes itself through you. And in this moment, it is not necessary to comprehend everything. It is not necessary to find a definitive conclusion. There exists only the possibility of perceiving something very simple and very profound at the same time. Before any explanation, there exists only the fact of being. But at some moment in this story, something changed. The universe, which existed without questions, began to observe itself, not because something external appeared, but because matter itself, after billions of years, organized itself in a different way. Then consciousness emerged, and with it emerged something new, the capacity to ask. And the most curious moment of all the history of the cosmos might not be the emergence of stars, nor galaxies, nor planets. Who knows, maybe it is this instant in which existence began to look at itself. Because when consciousness appeared, it was not something separate from the universe, it was the universe itself becoming conscious. For a long time we think of ourselves as something small before something immense, a human being looking at the sky, trying to understand the vastness. But there is an inversion in this image. You are not just before the universe, you are part of it. The atoms that form your body did not originate here. They were born inside stars that emerged long before the Earth. The carbon that forms your cells, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones. All of this was created in stellar explosions, scattered through space, reorganized slowly until reaching this moment. What we call you is matter that has crossed billions of years. It is the universe reorganized in the form of consciousness. It used to be said that we are stardust. This phrase that seems only poetic, it is profoundly literal. There is no absolute separation between you and the cosmos. The same process that created galaxies created the possibility of life. The same flow that organized planets organized your body. The universe did not just produce consciousness, it became conscious through it. When you think, the universe thinks. When you observe, the universe observes. And when you ask yourself about the meaning of life, it is existence itself reflecting on itself. And perhaps this changes the sensation of being here, because often consciousness brings a restlessness, the need to understand everything, the search for answers, the desire to find a definitive meaning. But if consciousness itself is part of the universe, then these questions are also part of the natural process of existence. They are not separate things. They are almost like a continuity. First came being, then came reflection. First the universe existed, and then it began to ask itself about its own existence. And there is something very curious in this. For billions of years, Everything happened without the need for explanation. The stars did not need to know why they burned. The planets did not need to understand their orbits. Life, it did not need to justify its emergence all the time. Existence always came before interpretation. But when consciousness emerged, the feeling also appeared that we need to understand to exist with tranquility, as if the answer were the condition for peace, as if meaning had to be defined. And it may be that it is not like that. It may be that the history of the cosmos itself suggests another thing, that existence does not depend on explanation, that the fact of being is already enough. You are the result of an almost unimaginable sequence of transformations. Matter organized itself slowly until becoming conscious. Now this consciousness looks around and tries to understand. This is natural, but at the same time it does not need to be urgent, because while you ask, something continues happening. The universe, it continues existing and continues existing through you. This creates a different sensation because there is no rigid separation between the observer and the observed. There is a continuity, there is a flow. There is something that began billions of years ago and reaches until this instant. This brings a kind of calm because you are part of this process. You do not need to carry the weight of finding definitive answers. The universe took billions of years to form stars, billions of years to form planets, billions of years to form life, and only a small instant to form consciousness. This consciousness, it does not need to solve everything immediately. Who knows? Maybe it can just perceive something simple. You are not outside of this story. You are this story happening now. And in this moment, an idea emerges. This consciousness, it does not need to solve everything immediately. Who knows? Maybe it can just perceive something simple. You are not outside of this story. You are this story happening now. And in this moment, an idea emerges. Before understanding the universe, you already are the universe in the form of consciousness. Before explaining existence, you already are existence perceiving itself. And before any answer, the cosmos continues moving, and through you it continues observing. And here is where something softens, because when you perceive that you are part of this immense flow, a definitive answer does not necessarily emerge. Something lighter emerges. The idea is that it is not necessary to choose between explanations. It is not necessary to decide if everything is just matter or if something beyond exists. It is not necessary to end the mystery. Existence itself is greater than any definition we try to give it. Science can describe processes, philosophy can propose meanings, spirituality can point towards something broader. But before everything, there exists the direct experience of being here. You breathe, you perceive, you feel that this fact by itself is extraordinary. After billions of years of cosmic silence, consciousness exists. There exists someone who looks, who feels, who wonders. Regardless of the way each person views this, there is something profoundly simple and beautiful in this instant. It can be seen as a natural process of the universe. It can be seen as creation, as an expression of something greater. Each vision tries to give language to the same phenomenon. The fact that existence reached this point and it continues happening. Well, maybe it is no longer necessary to choose a single explanation. Maybe it is possible to just recognize that there is something mysterious and at the same time familiar, something that does not need to be resolved to be lived, like looking at the sky at night. You can know the physics of the stars, you can imagine the infinite, you can feel your spiritual connection, or you can simply look. In any of these forms, the experience remains. The mystery continues there without demanding a conclusion, and then the relationship with the questions changes. They cease to be a weight and start being part of the beauty. You do not need to know exactly why you exist to perceive that you are alive. You do not need to define the meaning of the universe to feel the air entering. Perhaps that is what unites all the ways of looking at existence. The idea that behind the explanations, there is something happening, a flow that began long before us, and that will continue after. It is a movement that manifests among the stars, the planets in life, and now in consciousness. And in this moment, you do not need to do anything other than perceive this within yourself. There is something deeply peaceful in this. You do not need to carry the universe on your back. You do not need to solve the mystery of existence. You do not need to find a final conclusion for everything. It is enough to perceive that, regardless of the answers, something continues happening. Time follows, the world moves, and you participate here in this instant. And this happens when the questions silence themselves a little. An answer does not come, but a presence comes. A definition does not come, but a sensation. The idea that existing is already something immense, that before any scientific, philosophical, or spiritual explanation, there exists the fact of simply being here. And this is the lightest conclusion possible. Of the universe, it continues being a mystery, existence remains open. But in the middle of all this, there is this moment. You breathing, you perceiving, you being. Before any explanation, there exists only this. Well, if this flow of thought made sense to you, I invite you to come here in the comments and share your vision on the subject. Bring your experience to this exchange. And in case you are not yet subscribed to the channel, it will be a pleasure to have you here as part of this community. Until the next catch,